forward, now that we've gotten an idea of what we're talking about in terms of when we talk about an open, an open banking world, I guess the next step is to understand that, okay, so we have the incumbents, the traditional banks, we have the challengers, so some of which are maybe the startups, but these two that appear to be enemies to some really aren't. In fact, they make great partners. And so the next speaker will be talking about how these two worlds can collaborate, how they can partner, and will be giving us some models of how this can be done. He will also be telling us, though, about a third entity that is about to move into this space. So I'd like to welcome up to the stage Alessandro Atami, who is a partner of Pacemaker. Thank you, Alessandro.
Thank you.
Before I give you the word, I just wanted to say that when we have the panel, we will be taking questions from the audience. So I don't know if we can put up the phone number. This is the phone number that you can actually write texts to if you have any questions, mostly for the panel, but also if you have questions regarding what the speakers are saying. We won't be able to give them the questions directly, but certainly we'll be able to put them forward to our guests during the roundtable and understand better what it is that is most interesting to you in terms of things that you want to understand. Okay, Atami?
Thank you very much, and thank you for the Atami pronunciation. Very good. I thought I would start off with telling you a bit of a background of myself. You can read it there. I won't go too much about it, but I've been working in FinTech for a very long time, starting out in 1999, so before some of you guys are actually born, but I'll leave that for now. I got interested in FinTech, and one of the things that actually reminds me most of why it's important was a conversation that I had about 4 years ago, maybe 5, with the head of strategy of a big UK bank. So I went there, and we were talking about what they have achieved on digital with their bank, and saying how many people were using the app, and how many people were engaging with the app, and how much customer happiness and net promoter scores were going up on the back of that. So he listened to me very politely, and then he looked at me and he said, Alessandro, can we slow down the internet because so few people are going to the branches? So the mindset was that of the internet is not my friend, but the internet is the enemy that we have to deal with. Now, to make a long story short, 2 years later, this man was the head of digital for this big bank, and he was responsible for generating close to 60% of the sales of the business with 2,000 people out of a bank of close to 80,000. So you can see that actually good things can come from adopting things that you're scared of. So I thought it would be useful also to start off this discussion here, to give you a little bit of flavor of what is happening in other markets and what other CEOs and big banks are thinking about digital. So I start off with this. This is a quote from Francisco Gonzalez, the chairman of BBVA. He realizes that fintechs are a threat and a danger that can change the business. He also said in the same presentation that BBVA was going to be a software company very shortly. So he has understood that the importance of technology is going to be an element that is going to drive how businesses change, how financial banks change. Why is he saying this? And I think it will be useful to show you this. This is the homepage of HSBC in the UK. And all around it are the different companies that are competing with different slices. So every little line competes with that. So Zopa is doing lending, and Azimo is doing money transfers, and so on. So as you can see, what's happening is the banks are being killed with 1,000 arrows coming in every direction. So FinTech is a real threat. Why is this happening? Fundamentally for 4 things. One is customers are feeling comfortable and confident in using their digital devices. 2, technology is allowing things today that would not be possible years ago. 3, regulators are actually comfortable and becoming more and more comfortable in most markets, not in some of the markets that we're closer to. And last but not least, it's money. And this is investment that is happening in financial services and VCs. As you can see, there's a distinct acceleration in the year 2015, 16, 17 in money going into companies. And the size of these companies is becoming smaller and smaller, and the amount of investment is becoming greater and greater. So it's becoming very much a world where very specific organizations that are very efficient, very focused, are being funded with venture capital money. The result of this is that we need to adapt. And this is Piyush Gupta from DBS. DBS has been recently rated as the best bank in the world. And he says that FinTech is actually a situation where we have to fight to remain relevant. And banks have to fight and engage more closely with what is happening in the technology world to remain relevant. The reason he's saying this is, and one of the outcome of what he's saying is this. This is the similar chart to the one I showed you before. The difference here is this is corporate money. This is the money that banks are investing in FinTech. And these are both charts, thank you very much, from KPMG, so thank you very much for you guys. Thank you for that. So it's real data, I didn't make it up. You can see an acceleration in investments that actual corporates and banks are making in FinTech. So they're realizing that unlike what Gonzalez was saying, maybe the FinTechs are not our enemy, maybe the FinTechs are something we should be working with. And this you can see very much an acceleration from 2014 to 2015. And this is denoted very much by the change in regulation in some of the regulators and a different approach that has driven that engagement. Next slide, I want to say you the reason why banks are suddenly realizing this opportunity is there. This is a slide from one of the competitors of our friends at KPMG and Accenture, a company called McKinsey. And what they've done is they looked on average. They're saying that there's a potential threat from the adoption of digital or from technology of about 35% of the value of the of the profits of a bank. So 35% of your profits are at risk through digital. But if you adopt it in the right way, there's an upside of 45%. So net-net, if a bank would adopt digital, they would be a winner. Interestingly also is a differentiation between the adoption in different markets. Now, Southern Europe, as you can see on this chart, it's in the first one, Southern Europe's adoption of digital is the lowest in the world, in the developed world, and Scandinavia is the highest, 62%. America is somewhere in between. Western Europe, that means Germany, France, and the UK, are doing a lot better. They have the digital engagement there. So there's a great opportunity for Southern Europeans actually to catch up with this, because the economics of banking does not change dramatically from market to market, but the adoption of certain things do. So there's an opportunity that I wanted to highlight on this that we could do as people that bank in the southern part of Europe to actually engage more. And also, it's interesting to look at which products are actually driven on this. And interestingly, products that are simple, like a savings product has a fantastic simple rate, are the ones that get adopted more and more. And complex products like mortgages that have moving parts that are quite complicated to engage with are harder to do. I also thought it would be worthwhile to see what is the challenge that banks have and CEOs have in engaging and understanding and making this change happen in their organization. I think the number one concern, interestingly, is access to talent. And banks are seeing increasingly that they don't have the skills in-house, and the skills should be coming from somewhere else. That leads you to think that maybe, instead of trying to do everything in-house, that a lot of banks do, partnering could be a good way of engaging and accessing that talent. And so that leads me to what I want to talk about today, which is, what are banks globally doing on adopting digital technology and adopting what the opportunities that FinTech brings about. What I wanted to share is this is something that we've developed at the Pacemakers. Pacemakers is my firm. We develop innovation for large companies. We help large companies innovate, oftentimes with partnering. And this is a model that we put together to describe the different phases of evolution that a big bank can go through. And they are the adapt, evolve, and rethink phase. The adapt phase is where most banks today are. So what they're doing is that they are selling the products that they currently have in their portfolio through a digital channel, or they're finding ways of reducing costs. So, for example, KYC done using a digital device instead of having pieces of paper changing hands and things of that kind. So this is the first step, and most of the banks that you would have, that you know of, would be in that space. Can I do a raise of hands and saying how many of you are using their bank on a digital device? Okay. Maybe the other way around. Who is not using their bank on a digital device? Okay, nobody. So I think it's normal to see that that is actually happening. So the banks that you are being served with are actually engaging in the adapt phase. What this does, it creates a series of features and capabilities and functionalities that allows them to create new products. So a loan that is provided only online, a card that is sold only on your mobile device, things like that, simpler products that would not be possible in branch, that leads you to your new products. In parallel, as you're creating these two phases of adapt and evolve, the culture of your business is changing. So like that person I mentioned to you in the big UK bank, digital is no longer scary. Digital is a way of incremental sales. So you start changing the fear that you have, and your people become better and better because you're hiring people to do these things, or you're training your people to evolve. When all these things align, you get into what we call the new business models. And this is what leads to creating of the new bank and what the future would be. So all of you, if you know what technology can do today, if you were to recreate a bank, it would look very, very different than the banks you bank to with today. And that is what this would lead you to if you do that. I thought it would be worthwhile to give you some examples of the different things that participate in these different horizons. And as you can see, the online chat, mobile apps, digital payments, branch appointment booking, all stuff are the stuff that are relatively simple in the adapt phase. On the evolve phase, we're getting digital loans, digital effects, personal financial management, chatbots, and so on. The rethink phase is that what Giorgio was talking earlier is thinking about, for example, cryptocurrencies and the blockchain and artificial intelligence. All these things are being adapted, which will be used going forward. Interestingly, most banks, and I would say 99% of the banks, are in the adapt and evolve phase. So very few banks have created rethink ideas. They're experimenting, I don't doubt it, but they have not made that mainstream. And what that makes me think is that maybe that's to do with the fact that the adapt phase is something that is better done in-house. You know your business better, et cetera, et cetera. The evolve and rethink are best suited through a partnering or through an acquisition. Because that's the fastest way to get an injection of skills and expertise that you currently don't have. So unfortunately, what is happening is that most banks still think that they have to build in-house. So 51% of the banks today are building propositions internally with them, 31% are partnering, and only 18% are buying. So it's a huge percentage change in that, and what we're seeing is that that is something that is no longer sustainable. And a lot of the banks are seeing that they cannot continue doing it that way. So this is a quote from Ralph Hammers, the CEO of ING. What he wants to say in this is that the key to success is engaging with startups and fintechs, because they will be the fastest, most efficient ways of engaging with the changing world that digital technology is bringing about. So I thought it'd be worthwhile for us to say, why would this be the case? Because all of us have been highlighted and been told that fintechs are our worst enemies and we are there to destroy the business and so on and so forth. That's true, but fintechs have slowly realized that growing is very difficult and acquiring customers is not easy. And getting a brand credibility is quite expensive and complicated. So a lot of people will go to a startup to get a loan, but very few people will give their life savings to a startup. So that brand importance is right there. Interestingly also, is the ability to scale up is very hard, so economies of scale pop in, and regulation becomes a very big challenge for startups to be able to engage with in fintechs. On the other side, if you look at what the banks need, they need everything that the startup has. So agility, innovation, efficiency, speed, different culture, new customer focus, and new products. So in a way, it's a marriage made in heaven. So what we were told a year or two, maybe 3 years ago, that fintechs and banks were going to destroy each other, it's actually not the case. So I thought it'd be worthwhile for us to explore a few models of collaboration that we can see in the fintech and banks world. So this is a very simple 2x2 matrix that I've stolen from consultants. Two axes, if you want. The lower axis is brand commitment. How much do you have to engage with your brand as a bank? And this is entirely by the perspective of the big bank. And the other one is financial commitment. How much does it cost? And we have created 4 different different scenarios of how these mergers and partnerships can evolve. And I thought it would be worthwhile to describe some of these to you and to think about what is the one that is right for you and what is the one that is right for the circumstance you're working on. Because as a big organization, you won't be partnering only once with one organization, but there will be a portfolio of engagement and partnerships, and each one of them will be different. So let me share you some thoughts on the different partnership types. The channel is the one that has the low left-hand side of the chart. It's low brand commitment, low financial commitment. This is an example of Funding Circle. Is anybody familiar with Funding Circle in the audience? Not that many, okay. Yes, one person there. Funding Circle is a lender, is a peer-to-peer lender, so it matches lenders and borrowers together. It replaces the commercial lending for businesses, so a business would apply for that. What Royal Bank of Scotland has done here is they've realized that they cannot serve some customers, some businesses that go to them. So they said, we have a partnership with Funding Circle. You could go to Funding Circle to do this. What happens there is cost them very little because it's an interstitial page on their website. And it costs them very little on brand commitment. They're not saying Funding Circle is Royal Bank of Scotland, but saying Funding Circle is somebody you could work with. So this is a low-cost opportunity. Inevitably, it's much more positive for Funding Circle because many million people know RBS, but very few people know Funding Circle, like we've proven in this room. And this is a great opportunity for them to get visibility at very low cost. The next example I want to talk about is what we call the satellite. This is a very famous transaction that happened a few years ago. This is BBVA that went and bought a company called Simple Bank in the US. And this has been a mixed perception in the market of what the value of this was. So Simple was a very creative digital bank with very low infrastructure, low lifer cost. BBVA went and bought the whole bank. They spent $130 million to buy this. And they left it independent, without changing the brand, without forcing itself on them, and so on and so forth, to see how this thrives. And this Simple is slowly growing. They've had to do some financial architecture. They have to write off some money that they invested in it and so on. But the bank is fundamentally moving on and growing. As a brand perspective, BBVA made very little investment in this because their brand has not changed. As far as customers are concerned, Simple is Simple, BBVA is BBVA. Financially, they spent $130 million. But if you compare this to the cost they would have had for BBVA to build the beta bank, which some estimates are $500 million to $1 billion, they got this very cheaply. So this is a trial bank that they have built at a much, much lower cost. If Simple Bank succeeds, they have the prototype for the bank of the future. If Simple Bank fails, they spent $100 million. They spend $1.5 billion every year on IT, of which 75% of that spend goes to maintenance. This is not a very big expense. So this is a really interesting strategy that some companies can take. The next model I want to talk about is a company called Tink. Tink is a PFM tool that is very strong in Scandinavia. What you're seeing here is ABN AMRO has gone and created its own PFM, personal financial management tool. This is what shows you how you're spending your money. It categorizes them, gives you some advice on how you spend, tells you where you've spent it. It's a really nice way of controlling your money. BBVA and Tink are two separate organizations. ABN AMRO has risked by creating a product that they put their name on, so their brand is committed, but at relatively low cost, because Tink is a supplier to BBVA in this case. For Tink, it's great because they're getting a case study and they're getting a huge number of users. For ABN AMRO, it's a low-cost way of doing something new. It's a win-win situation. The challenge for ABN AMRO is, yes, they built something new, but Tink can go and sell it to another bank, and the competitors would have the same thing. What they thought at ABN AMRO is, it doesn't matter, because it's all about being first. Doesn't matter if somebody catches up with me, because by the time they do, I'm ahead of the game. So this is another interesting model for partnerships. The last model is something quite unusual. This is the merger. This is when a company gets acquired and the brand and the company that is acquired disappears inside the other company. This is something we are used to when we talk about traditional M&A activity. It's unusual in the fintech world. What's happened here is Goldman Sachs spent what people say is around $100 million to acquire an entirely new division to create a special type of credit card internally for the new bank called Marcus. Marcus is the bank that Goldman Sachs is launched in the UK and in the US. What they've done is they invested all this money to hire, instead of hiring people, they bought people. And these people are committed to stay within Goldman to create this product. Very high brand commitment because this is something branded Marcus, which is a Goldman brand, and very high financial commitment because they spent a lot of money. So it's a very high risk, but potentially high return way of engaging. So ultimately, what I wanted to say is these are the four models that we talked about, but as we said earlier, the real challenge is that there's a new entrant into the space. And this is some of our previous presenters mentioned previously. And this new entrant is somebody that is an organization that has a number of organizations that have a very different way of the world. And this is what, unsurprisingly, you would have expected from me to say as the new entrant. And big tech is the new entrant that will be challenging these organizations. And big tech is, you may recognize Facebook, Apple, Google, and Amazon. Microsoft is a big challenger, but the other three are Chinese companies. And they are huge, and they are coming. Okay? And that we have to be careful. Now, what's interesting about these companies is that they don't really care about banking. If you ask Facebook, Facebook does not want to be a bank. They don't want to make income, generate income through banking services. They want the data of the customer to be able to sell them things better. Google is the same. They want to have transaction information, so when you click on something on a Google search, they can go back to the person who's paid for that search and say, Alessandro clicked on that ad on that Sony television. He went and bought that Sony television. The click is not 50 euro cents, but it's 50 euros. And they can change their business model completely. Apple wants to sell you a new phone, and they want to make sure that your new phone is Apple. If you also bank on your phone, in addition to music and buying goods and calling your friends and chatting, it's another reason for you to buy Apple. Interestingly, Amazon wants to be a channel, and they want to sell products made by all the other banks. In order to do this, they have to become a current account. They have to have some engagement with the client that they can then open accounts for them in other players. So in a good way, you'd say, wow, Amazon can now sell my products. The bad story is that they compare your products very, very transparently with everybody else, and also make it very, very hard for you to be able to compete on everything except price. Ultimately, what it is, though, is that neither of these people, all these big companies, do not care about the product, the financial product. They have lots of money, and they have lots of customers. They have lots of talent. They know how to do things much, much better than the banks do. They hate regulation. They don't want to be regulated. And they're not looking for banking income because they're making so much money from other things. So ultimately what it is, they won't be banks. So when Apple, Amazon, Google, GAFA, Tencent, etc. will come in, they will not be banks, but they will eat the banks. And they will make the banks slaves or a channel for their distribution. And I think that is something that you need to think about when you're thinking about what the future is. So I thought I'd leave you with a few bullet points on what I thought is important. Firstly, digital change is inevitable. It's not a decision. It's not something that you can say, I'm not going to do. And if you in your banking organization are not engaging digital change, you are putting your company at risk, and they will be challenged. Banks need to change, but it's hard to do it with the existing talent, and the talent has to grow. And that talent can be very much grown through partnering and acquisitions. FinTechs are looking for a big partner because they need money and they need customers, and the banks have that. The right type of partnership is what's determining the success of things. So the wrong partnership with the right partner can break the opportunity. And there's different types of partnership, and the different partnerships are not unique to you. So you have to think about what proposition is right for that type of relationship. And last but not least, FinTechs and banks should come together to be able to withstand the onslaught of big tech, because big tech is really after them. Thank you very much.
So thank you. That's very, very interesting. So you spoke about the third entity.
Yes.
What are they in it for?
They're in it for the data, really. What they want is the richest source of information that we have on what we do is how we spend our money. And with technology, that follows us everywhere. And you can get a much, much better perspective of who I am on the way I spend my money than on the way I describe myself to you on what I search. So that information is something that would make it even more complete and holistic, their knowledge of me as an individual, and that's valuable.